Mass atrocities like genocide are preventable, at least according to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. They are trying to prove just that. The museum has started a new initiative called the Early Warning Project. It takes sophisticated and statistical analysis and feedback from experts, publicly available for the first time. Its goal is to produce early warnings that can help governments, policymakers, advocacy groups, as well as scholars decide where to concentrate their efforts against mass atrocities. So, I have a quote here, Jose, from Cameron Hudson. He's the director of Simon Skjodt Center of Prevention of Genocide at the museum. Here's what he has to say. From past genocides in Darfur, Bosnia, Rwanda, and the Holocaust, we have learned what the clear early warning signs are that precede mass violence. Tracking those indicators in at-risk countries around the world will, for the first time, allow us to look over the horizon to implement smarter, cheaper, and more effective policies that prevent mass violence. Now, I went on the website and I was looking around. It's actually extremely interesting. They have these graphs. I mean, they really take this data serious. I think we have a picture, a screen grab from the website. So there on the top you see, before the 1st of January 2016, will there be a new episode of mass killings in Iraq? And there's a graph with numbers from experts, from all sorts of people who have taken data, and they combine it and they come up with these graphs, and they're literally trying to prevent extremely specific things, like a new episode of mass killings in Iraq by a certain date. So the question is this really going to make a change? Is this going to help? Because when it comes to things, I mentioned Rwanda, for example. I mean, the guy said it in the quote, but when you talk about Rwanda, are you going to tell me that the Clinton organization, administration didn't have any idea what was going on there? They didn't have the numbers, they didn't have the statistics? I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it goes down to politics. Yeah. It goes down to money. It goes down to all sorts of things that don't really have to do with early prevention. Or am I wrong? Because for me, it seems like the U.S. really wasn't interested in intervening in Rwanda because it was far away. It wasn't Europe. It wasn't close to our borders, and we really didn't care about it, right? It really wasn't on the spotlight until it was too late. And then the Clinton administration kind of came out and said, well, we screwed up. We should have definitely done more. But that was way down the road. I'm just thinking, is this really going to change anything? Because we're talking about Syria, Sudan, South Sudan, North Korea, the Central African Republic, Liberia, Libya, Nigeria. The list goes on of countries that desperately need help now, and that this could be directly applied to. Because we can see Nigeria, for example, where you have the insurgency in the northeast. We're talking about Boko Haram. This would be very helpful, right? We can kind of guess or try to see where the next suicide attack will be in some marketplace that'll kill 20 people, or in Kenya in a shopping mall. So it gets down to really specifics, and I think it's really interesting that they're taking this data and they're putting it for the public for the first time to see, and it's very interactive. You can kind of go, and when you hover over this graph, it tells you the years and everything. It's really interesting, but the question is it enough? Is it going to do something?
Of course, I think first, the important thing that we need to understand is that prevention is really the only cure for mass violence. After the fact, there's not much we can do to prevent it or cure it. Right. So I think that this type of analysis and the rise of data science has allowed for us to use a very ancient concept, but that resonates more than ever. History repeats itself. We see with the data that we have certain indicators like the decay of social tissue, like the speed of the velocity where a conflict, ethnic conflict happens in a territory. All of these things we can measure, and we can see that they repeat itself in each one of these mass killings and these terrible tragedies. Now, like you mentioned, the stretch between publishing this knowledge and policymakers and governments actually taking action upon it, it's a big difference and a big stretch that we have to bridge. Now, just the fact that they're starting to put this and create awareness and, like you say, maybe show responsibilities where they need to be shown. Like you said, the governments that haven't acted before, they don't have any reason now not to act again in the future. And like you mentioned, there's many boiling areas in the country, not in the country, in the globe, that need attention and that might develop into these type of scenarios.
Right, and I think, I mean, I agree with you with everything that you just said, but what really resonated with me was what you mentioned about history repeating itself. Now, this is exactly what this whole initiative is talking about, not making the same mistakes that we made before. So if we're going to talk about, some spike in violence somewhere in the Middle East, why don't we start here at home as well, right? This is in our nation's capital. What about the airstrikes, right, that are going on, the Saudi-led airstrikes that we're obviously funding, that we're helping out, it's part of our coalition, that are going down in Yemen? killing innocent people, destroying buildings, possibly radicalizing more people where this power vacuum is already existing. Hello, have we heard this before somewhere else, right? Iraq, maybe even Syria. I mean, the list goes on, but it's about history repeating itself, right? And putting it out there. And whether this works or not, though, my whole idea is the fact that, well, at least people are talking about this. Because, look, I mentioned some of the big ones, right? The CAR, Libya, Nigeria. But what about the other countries like Sri Lanka, Myanmar, where other things might be, hopefully not, but that could possibly ensue in the future? They're touching on every single country here, and they're really bringing to light a lot of things. And I think that's really what's important, is shining a light on these things that other people aren't talking about. Because when the media gets a hold of it, that's when people start talking. And then that's actually when the government says, okay, we might piss a lot of people off, let's take action. Again, to go back to Rwanda, the exact same thing. No one was talking about it until it was too freaking late.
Well, just the fact that we show interest, like you mentioned, is the takeaway from this story is the fact that there's information and there's data that has been, confirmed by scientists and specialists on the matter that we can't overlook anymore. And we have to, moving forward, see the warning signs. And the other thing, and many cynical viewers might feel this way, that all of this is beautiful and it's on paper, but the reality is the industrial military complex has a lot of power and a lot of influence to just bypass all of this information and decide not to listen to it because there's other interests at play. And we have to be vigilant of that, and we have to understand that it's a long process for the good decisions to be made.
Right, I totally agree with that as well. But we want to know what you guys at home have to say about this. What do you think about the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., putting the numbers together, putting the facts together, and literally trying to predict when the next genocide or other sort of atrocity will happen? Let us know in the comments below if you think that it'll actually help anything or if it's, completely useless. Let us know, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the LibTV2 for more.